His breath hitched as I shifted beneath him. One arm trembled near my head, fingers curling into the mattress like he needed something to hold on to. He moaned softly, God, not loud, not dramatic, just this broken, barely there sound that vibrated through his chest against mine. I shouldn't have let it get this far. I shouldn't have let him in at all. But his weight on me, the warmth of his skin, the hesitant rhythm of his hips, it all felt too human, too desperate. His body didn't move with confidence. It moved with need, with confusion, with that clumsy, aching edge only someone too young to know better brings when they're trying not to mess up what they already know is wrong. He kept glancing down at me like I was going to change my mind, like at any second I'd shove him off and say I made a mistake. I didn't. I wrapped my legs tighter around his waist. I pulled him closer, deeper, until I could feel every inch of him shaking through me. His hands were flat against the bed, now knuckles white, like he was holding himself together through the tension, through the weight of what we were doing, what I let happen, what I started. And when he buried his face against my neck, letting out another soft, stuttering breath, I closed my eyes and pressed my palm against the back of his head. I didn't want to see the ceiling. I didn't want to remember where we were, how late it was, how old I was compared to him. I just wanted to feel like someone again, like a body that could still be wanted, still be touched. I never imagined I'd cross this line. Not at 38. Not with a boy who still had a goddamn curfew 2 years ago. Not with someone whose mail I still sometimes collected, who once asked me if his Amazon packages were safe by the door because he'd heard about porch thieves. Not with someone who wore earbuds in the hallway, who said ma'am the first time we spoke. Not with someone young enough to be in photos beside my son at Little League back when they were both 10, and I was just a tired mom with sunscreen and folding chairs. But here we are. And I was the one whose fingers were still digging into his back. What would you do if the man who made you feel alive again was young enough to be your son's friend? That question didn't come to me the night he moved in downstairs. It didn't even come when he asked me if he could borrow the spare key because he'd locked himself out. It came later, slow and unwanted. The night I caught him looking too long, then looking away like shame was something he hadn't learned how to carry yet. His name is Jason, 22. Maybe 23 now. I stopped asking birthdays because I didn't want to do the math anymore. He moved into the unit beneath mine after my last tenant broke their lease. I manage the small duplex I inherited after my father passed. It's nothing special. 2 stories, old bones, creaky stairs. I live upstairs. The lower unit's been rented by quiet types before. Retirees, couples starting over, a woman with 2 cats who left the place smelling like mint and tuna. Jason wasn't what I expected. He came in with boxes and a smile that didn't try too hard. Polite, easygoing. He paid rent on time and always said thank you when I dropped off the Wi-Fi password or updates from the HOA. And for a while, that was it. Until it wasn't. It started small. He'd linger when I said hi. Ask how my day was, like it actually mattered. He started doing little things, offering to bring up groceries, raking the shared driveway without being asked. Once he helped fix a broken light fixture in my stairwell. I didn't ask. He just noticed it was hanging and offered. And I let him. I let him in. Not just into the upstairs hallway, not just past the line of what was appropriate between landlord and tenant, but past all the walls I'd put up since my divorce 3 years ago, since Evan, my son, left for college, since I stopped being anyone's wife, anyone's priority, anyone's warmth. The night it happened, I was in pajamas, nothing flattering, an old t-shirt and shorts. My hair was up in a way that said I hadn't expected company. He came by because the pipes under his sink were leaking. Again. I told him I'd look at it in the morning. He hesitated, then said I don't want to bother you, but I just don't know what I'm doing down there. So I went. I followed him into the lower unit barefoot. He handed me a flashlight, even though the lights worked. I crouched down, reached under the sink, and the flashlight beam landed on a slow drip, tracing its way into a metal bowl. "It's manageable," I said. Still annoying. When I turned to say something else, he was standing too close. Not inappropriate close, just not far enough. His shoulder brushed mine when he leaned in. He smelled like clean laundry and something warm I couldn't name. His eyes dropped, then lifted, and he smiled. "I can pay for a plumber if it's too much." I didn't say anything. His voice got quieter. "You okay?" And I don't know what look I gave him. Maybe something cracked. Maybe I let too much out. But something shifted, because he stepped closer, and I didn't stop him. It happened in his kitchen with the leaky pipe still dripping behind us, with my back pressed to the old counter, with his mouth against mine like he was afraid I'd disappear if he didn't keep holding on. I didn't disappear. I leaned in. Let him touch me like he meant it. Let him moan against my skin. Let him in. Before we get too deep, do me a favor, like and subscribe. These stories aren't for everyone, but if you've come this far, you get it. The more you watch them through, the more YouTube shows them to others who feel the same, and that means more stories coming your way. Let's begin. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in the dark sheets pulled to my chest, like they could hide what had already happened. I kept replaying every second of it, every pause, every breath between words we didn't say. I could still feel his body over mine, how warm his skin was, how unsure his hands felt when he first touched my sides, and how that uncertainty melted into something hungry. But the guilt started creeping in before the sun came up. I turned 40 last December. It wasn't dramatic. No big party, no grand realization, just a quiet dinner with a few co-workers who toasted me with cheap wine, and a half-hearted, "you don't look a day over 35. I went home, rinsed the makeup off my face, and stared in the mirror for a long time. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I think I just wanted to see if the world had changed. It hadn't. I'd been divorced for 3 years at that point. Evan was away at school. I kept my schedule full to avoid the silence. I worked remote 3 days a week, spent weekends organizing cupboards, or touching up baseboards no one else noticed. I even tried dating again once. It lasted 2 awkward dinners and 1 reluctant kiss in a parking lot. The man Brian, a retired real estate broker, called me darlin' and spent most of the meal listing out his allergies. When he leaned in to kiss me, it felt more like someone trying to check an item off a list than anything tender. So no, I wasn't looking. I didn't even see Jason that way. Not at first. He moved in after the woman downstairs left unexpectedly. She'd gotten a job across the country, left her keys in the mailbox, with a short note and a $100 gift card to Starbucks. I put up a listing online. A few days later, Jason showed up. Bright eyes, clean cut, asked smart questions. He'd just graduated from community college, starting some work-from-home gig in digital something or other, and needed a place while saving for grad school. He was polite, maybe a little shy, wore an oversized sweatshirt, and smelled like peppermint. "You manage the building?" he asked that first day. "I live upstairs," I said. "My father left me the place. I just keep it from falling apart." He smiled. "Seems solid to me." That was it. Nothing suggestive. No warning signs. Just a young guy, eager to make a decent first impression. I told him he could move in the following week. And at first it was simple. He kept to himself. Played music, sometimes soft and lo-fi. I'd hear him walking across the floor now and then, never stomping, just present. He'd nod when we passed on the sidewalk or in the shared entryway. He held doors. Said, "Have a good one," every time he checked his mail. It was maybe a month in before we had our first real conversation. I'd just come back from Trader Joe's with 2 bags of groceries and a tired back. He was outside, crouched on the porch, replacing a screw on his bike's pedal. I must have looked winded because he stood up and said, "You okay?" "Just old joints," I joked. He laughed. "You're not old." I raised an eyebrow. "How would you know?" He shrugged that casual boyish shrug that never carries weight. "You walk like someone who does yoga. My mum does yoga. She's 50 and could probably outrun me." I couldn't help but smile. Flattery gets you nowhere. That wasn't flattery. We talked a little longer that day. He told me about his job, some kind of customer experience analyst. He hated it, said it felt like being a digital babysitter. I told him I used to work in marketing. He looked surprised. "I figured you were in law or something," he said. "What, because I wear cardigans and correct your grammar?" He grinned. "Exactly. It was light, easy, a little too easy." Over the next few weeks, it happened more and more, these little moments. Not flirtatious, not outright, but soft things that slipped between the cracks. A wave through the kitchen window. A knock on my door to ask about garbage pickup. Once he left a note with a banana bread loaf. Sorry if the music was loud. Peace offering. It wasn't loud. I hadn't even noticed. But I kept the note. It sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I threw it away. Something changed after that. Not overnight, but gradually. He started pausing more in conversation, holding eye contact longer than he used to. His compliments became quieter, but lingered more. "This color looks good on you," he said once when I came down in a navy dress. It was nothing special. I'd worn it to a neighborhood HOA meeting. Still, the way he said it low, with a kind of quiet reverence, caught me off guard. He didn't look away right away, and I didn't correct him. That was the moment I felt the ground shift beneath us, just a little. That shift became an ache. Not loud, not constant, but it was there. I'd find myself waiting for the sound of his footsteps below mine. I noticed when his car came and went. I started cooking slightly later, so he'd smell the garlic or butter through the vents, and maybe come up with some excuse to knock on the door. I was ashamed of that, ashamed of the thrill I got when he looked at me like I was more than the woman who owned his apartment, like I was someone he wanted to touch. The last straw was the night he came home late, sweaty from a run shirt clinging to his back. He stopped on the porch, caught his breath, and looked up at my window. I was standing there watching like a cliché, not expecting him to see me. But he did, and he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a tenant thanking a landlord. It was something else, something quiet and bold and complicated. And I didn't move away from the glass. I stood there and watched him go inside. That night I didn't sleep much either, because no matter how many reasons I gave myself to let it go, to put that boundary back where it belonged, the truth had already settled in. He didn't look at me like I was just older. He looked at me like I was still someone worth craving, and part of me, some forgotten, quiet part, craved him back. It was never supposed to go past that. A smile through a window, a kind word at the door, a shared glance that lingered a beat too long, followed by nothing. That's what grown-ups do. You feel something inappropriate, you acknowledge it quietly, if only to yourself, and then you shut the damn door. You don't let it grow. But I didn't shut it. Not all the way. There were too many little cracks in my day where he slipped through. A knock when his internet cut out. "Could I use your Wi-Fi for just a sec?" Turned into 30 minutes of him sitting at my table, tapping on his laptop, sipping the tea I handed him like it was routine, like we'd done it 100 times before, like we were just two people in the same house, sharing space. But I wasn't just anyone, and he wasn't a friend. He wasn't my peer. I was twice divorced. I paid the property taxes. I kept a drawer full of warranties and receipts. I had a son 2 years younger than him. Jason didn't belong in my kitchen, but he made himself fit. Not with arrogance. He never tried to charm me, never leaned in too close, never called me beautiful. He was too careful for that. Instead, it was smaller things. He remembered I liked mint tea and would bring up a box from the store without asking. He returned my Tupperware and washed it first. He helped replace the porch light one day and stayed a minute longer to test the switch, though we both knew it worked. When he came over, he never rushed to leave. Once, when I was out walking, I caught him sitting on the top step of the porch, elbows on his knees, watching the sky like he didn't want to be alone in his unit. "You good?" I asked. He turned slowly, like he hadn't noticed me until then. "Yeah, just quiet down there sometimes." I understood that. So I sat beside him, knees almost touching both of us, staring out toward nothing. The sun was low. The air smelled like dry leaves and barbecue smoke from a few houses down. We didn't talk. Not for a long time. But something about that silence made my chest feel too full. I started leaving my blinds open at night. Not wide, but enough to cast light onto the shared porch. I'd be at the sink washing dishes, hair pulled back, and I'd catch movement, his shape crossing in the glow, sometimes pausing just long enough that I knew he saw me. He never said anything about it, but neither did I. Then came the day he asked if I wanted help moving some boxes. I'd been clearing out the upstairs closet, old things of my father's I'd put off sorting for too long. It wasn't an invitation. He knocked, said he heard the noise and offered. "I'm strong," he added, almost sheepish. And kind of bored, I let him in. He moved like someone who wasn't sure if he was allowed to be in the room. Careful hands tucked at his sides unless they were lifting something. He never brushed against me, never looked too long. Still, I could feel the space between us shifting. At one point, he reached for a box on a high shelf, and his shirt lifted just enough for me to see the skin above his waistband. Smooth taut flushed from the strain. I looked away so fast it made me dizzy, but not fast enough, because when he turned, his eyes met mine. Just for a second, and that second felt like something caught fire between us. He didn't say a word, just set the box down and asked if I wanted to keep it or toss it. We didn't talk about the moment, but from that point on, every time he came upstairs, it was like something unspoken sat between us. He started coming up more often. He'd knock under some pretense, a question about the lease, needing duct tape, wanting to return something that didn't need returning. Once he brought up cookies he baked from a mix. "They're a little burnt," he said, "but still warm." I took one. He waited. "Good?" he asked. I nodded. "Better than most things I've tasted this week." He smiled. And didn't leave. I should have asked him to go. I should have drawn the line, reminded myself what we were. Landlord, tenant, nothing more. But I poured 2 glasses of milk and sat across from him at the table. That night we didn't touch. We just sat there, 2 cookies each, slow sips of milk laughter that got a little too relaxed. When he left, he looked at me like he wanted to say something else. His hand hovered like he might touch my arm. He didn't, but my skin burned there anyway. A week later, I found him outside, fixing a bike tire again. Shirtless, bent over back muscles flexing with every pump of the air valve. It was 100 degrees out. The sun caught the sweat along his neck and shoulders. I stepped out onto the porch without meaning to. He looked up, squinting. "Hey." "Hot day," I said. "Yeah. Might melt." He stood, wiped his hands on a rag, and grinned. "Want some water?" I asked. "You sure know." "Yeah." Inside, he drank from a glass standing by the counter. I leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. We didn't talk much. But he kept looking at me, not brazen, not cocky, like he didn't know if he was allowed to keep looking. I didn't tell him to stop. That was the first time he stepped closer. Just 1 foot forward, not enough to bridge the space, but enough to feel it thin. I didn't move. He didn't move either. We stood like that for seconds that stretched too long. I could smell the sweat drying on his skin. I could see the way his chest lifted when he breathed, and for the first time I let myself wonder, really wonder, what it would feel like to kiss him. He said nothing, didn't lean in, didn't try, but his fingers flexed against the glass, and he looked at my mouth, and I swear I forgot how to breathe. He left after that. Said, "Thank you," stepped back, didn't touch me. But something had shifted, and we both knew it. That night I sat on the edge of my bed, heartbeat in my throat, wondering if I'd imagined it all. But I hadn't. The air between us had changed, and I knew the next time he got that close, I wouldn't be the one to stop it. It happened on a Tuesday, not a date night, not a holiday, not some cinematic evening with rain or candlelight, just Tuesday. I'd come back late from a grocery run, still in work clothes, blouse clinging in the heat hair, sticking to my neck. I remember being annoyed that I'd forgotten to buy butter. That's how mundane it all was. Then came the knock. Not loud, just that soft, almost hesitant knock I'd started to recognize as his. Jason stood there in a black t-shirt and basketball shorts, holding a small fan. "My AC's struggling," he said, offering a sheepish smile. Figured I'd try to borrow a breeze from upstairs. I laughed, too tired to think clearly. "You want to stand in front of mine?" "No," he said quickly. Then slower. "I mean, unless I can hang out for a minute." It was stupid, small talk, nothing dangerous in the words, but there was something underneath, thicker, quieter, waiting. I stepped back. "Sure. Come in." He walked past me and into the kitchen, like he'd done it a dozen times, like he belonged there. The sun was going down, casting a soft amber light across the tile. I set the grocery bags on the counter, started unpacking like it was any other evening, but my hands felt too warm, my skin too aware. He leaned on the opposite counter watching, not in a leering way, just quiet, calm, but present. And that presence started filling the room in a way that made it hard to breathe. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, not looking up. "Long day?" "Yeah," he said. Then a pause. "You look tense." I smiled without humor. "Welcome to adulthood." Another pause. "Can I help?" It was the way he said it, not flirty, not joking, just open. Like he'd mean it if I asked for anything, like the offer was real. I looked up, and everything slowed down. He wasn't trying to be sexy. His face was still, his eyes locked on mine, like he was afraid I'd run if he blinked. I took one breath, then another, and I stepped toward him. He didn't move, not even when I got close enough to smell the faint trace of soap on his skin. Something earthy and clean. My fingers lifted before I could stop them and brushed against his arm. His skin was hot. He flinched, but just barely. Not from fear, from awareness. "Jason," I started. He shook his head softly. "I know." I didn't know what he meant by that. I didn't ask. I just let my hand rest a little heavier on his arm, and I watched his breath stutter. His eyes searched mine, almost nervous, almost asking. Then he stepped closer. I felt his chest, near mine, not touching, just hovering. One more inch, and we'd break everything. His hand brushed against my hip, barely there, and then he pulled back just an inch, like he wasn't sure if I'd allow more. "You're shaking," he whispered. I know I said. "So are you." We stood like that, suspended for seconds that felt like hours. Then I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't confident. It was soft and slow and trembling. His mouth moved against mine, like he didn't trust it was happening. His hand slid up my side, warm and hesitant fingers, curling into the fabric of my blouse, like he needed something to hold on to. When we broke apart, he didn't say a word. He looked at me like I was something impossible. I turned away. Not to end it, but to breathe. To think. But he followed. He stood behind me close enough that I could feel the heat rolling off him, and when I leaned back, just slightly, he didn't hesitate. His arms slipped around my waist, pulling me into him. I felt his breath against my neck, his body flushed to mine, and something in me broke open. I turned, caught his face in my hands, kissed him harder this time. His mouth opened against mine, hungrier now, less afraid. His hands slid under my shirt. Not fast, not aggressive, just bold. He touched like someone who dreamed it, then doubted it, and finally couldn't hold back. We moved without speaking. Down the hallway, into the bedroom. My blouse hit the floor first, then his shirt. His hands were on my hips, then my back, then my face again like he couldn't decide what to hold. I pulled him down with me onto the bed. He hovered above, looking at me like he still didn't believe I was real. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded, breathless. "Yeah." He kissed my collarbone, then lower. His mouth was soft, warm, slow, like he was learning every inch of me. My hands found his back, traced the curve of his spine, felt the tremble in his muscles when I pulled him closer, and when he finally pressed into me, he gasped. Not loud, just broken. I let my legs wrap around his hips. I held the back of his neck. I whispered his name once and felt his whole body tense in response. He moved slowly, gently, like he didn't want to hurt me, like he wasn't sure how much he could give. It wasn't polished. It wasn't practiced. It was human. Messy and aching and warm. At one point I felt him shudder, really shudder, his arms tightening around me, breath catching in his throat. He buried his face against my shoulder, like he needed some place to hide. And I held him. I let him. Afterward, we didn't move right away. He lay beside me, his hand resting on my stomach, eyes wide and unsure. I stared at the ceiling, breath still unsteady, heart thudding hard enough to hurt. There were no words, none that would have made any of it easier. He looked over finally and whispered, "You're not mad at me, right?" I blinked, and something in me broke again. I reached for his hand and squeezed it. "No," I said, voice raw. "I'm mad at myself, but I didn't let go. And neither did he." The morning after I didn't know how to look at myself. I sat on the edge of the bed with the sheets still tangled around my waist, staring down at the floor like it might have answers. Jason was still asleep beside me, breathing softly, his face turned toward the window. He looked younger in the light. Too young. My skin felt too tight. I slipped out of bed quietly, pulling on a robe, careful not to wake him. I needed space, air, something to ground me before the shame caught up to what I'd done. In the bathroom mirror, I looked like a stranger. My lips were swollen, my eyes rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that didn't come from lack of sleep. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and worse, I hadn't been pushed. I'd opened the door. I'd pulled him in. I'd wanted to. The reflection stared back at me like it knew better. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, hands trembling just enough to make the ice rattle. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Everything in me screamed to make it feel normal again, but nothing would be. Not after the way he touched me. Not after the way I let him. He came out an hour later, barefoot, shirtless, hair tousled. His eyes met mine like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to speak. "Morning," he said softly. I nodded. "There's coffee." He moved toward the counter, movements careful, like he didn't want to knock something over, like I was the fragile thing now. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked, his voice tentative. I swallowed. "Not yet." Jason didn't push. He stood beside the fridge, sipping slowly, eyes watching me over the rim of the mug like I might vanish. And for a moment, I envied him how easily he was still able to breathe, like the weight of it hadn't landed on his chest yet, but it would. The guilt was slow at first, a dull ache beneath my ribs that I tried to ignore. But as the day stretched on, it settled deeper, heavier. Because it wasn't just what we did, it was who we were when we did it. I wasn't his girlfriend. I wasn't his equal. I was his landlord. I was a woman with bills and crow's feet, and a son who'd played on the same baseball team as Jason 10 years ago. Evan would have recognized his face. That fact kept crawling up my spine like cold fingers. Later that afternoon, after Jason had gone back to his unit, I sat on the couch staring at the TV without hearing a word of it. I kept replaying everything: his hand on my waist, the way he whispered my name, the way I'd responded to it like it belonged to me again. And I hated how much I missed it already. I started avoiding him the next day. Not in obvious ways, just little shifts. Closing my blinds, pretending to be on a call when he knocked, leaving out earlier for errands so I wouldn't have to cross paths. But he noticed. On the fourth day he caught me by the mailboxes. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked quietly. I froze. "No, you didn't." He stepped closer. "Then why are you acting like I don't exist? I'm not. You won't even look at me." "I am looking at you," I said, finally meeting his eyes. He flinched at the sharpness in my tone. I immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I need time." He was quiet a moment. "Then I miss you." God, that word, miss. Like we'd been something real. Like this was a breakup. Like he wasn't a 20-something kid who didn't understand that what we did wasn't sexy, it was dangerous. I looked away. "This can't keep happening, Jason." "Why not?" "Because I know better." I snapped. That silenced him. I felt the shift in his posture, the deflation, the sting. He didn't argue, just stepped back, nodded, and walked down the steps without another word. And yet that night I stood at my bedroom window again, watching the light from his unit flicker beneath mine, wondering if he'd come back, hoping he wouldn't. The weeks that followed were messy. He didn't knock. I didn't ask. But we kept finding each other in the in-betweens: hallway glances, awkward run-ins, small talk with too much tension. He'd look at me like he still felt it, like it hadn't gone away, and I'd look back like I wished it had. The worst part wasn't that I missed the way he touched me. It was that I missed the way he saw me. He looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than tired eyes and grocery lists and rent notices. He made me feel wanted, and I hadn't felt that in years. But the guilt didn't go away. It got sharper, more defined. I started hearing the echo of Evan's voice in my head, asking about summer break, about friends from home. I imagined what he'd say if he knew, how betrayed he'd feel, how ashamed he'd be. Jason didn't seem to carry that fear. He texted me once late at night, "I don't know what this is supposed to be, but I think about you all the time." I didn't respond. The next day he was quiet, still kind, still respectful, but smaller, like he'd tucked something back inside and wasn't sure it would be safe to bring it out again. And still I caught myself staring too long. The age difference started to feel wider in the light. It showed in the way he talked about his future, like it was still being built. In how he lit up about video games and weekend road trips and cheap tacos from food trucks I hadn't touched since I was 24. It wasn't just time separating us. It was life. And yet part of me still craved him, his youth, his hunger, the way he touched me like I was new. And that part terrified me, because this isn't going to stay quiet forever. And when it explodes, it won't just hurt me. I thought I had more time. More time before someone noticed, before the air changed too much, before the guilt inside me turned into exposure. But it didn't play out how I expected. It wasn't a neighbor or a co-worker, or even Evan who first saw through the cracks. It was Carol. She's not nosy, just observant. The kind of friend who never pries until she's already pieced together the outline and just needs you to fill in the colors. We met for lunch one Sunday, one of those routine catch-ups that's really more about presence than conversation. She talked about her daughter's engagement, the new Pilates studio, some drama at her book club. Then she sipped her wine, tilted her head and asked, "So who's the boy?" I blinked. "What boy?" Carol smiled without smiling. "Come on, I've seen him. That one downstairs. Tall, sweet face, always looking like he wants to say something, but holds it in." I said nothing. She leaned in. "You think I haven't noticed the way he watches your door when I visit?" My throat tightened. There's nothing going on. Carol just held my gaze. Didn't say there was. "But you're glowing a little, and not from moisturizer." "So, what's the story?" I could have lied. Should have. But something in me broke. I shook my head. "It's not a story. It's a mistake." Her eyes softened. "A mistake you regret?" I didn't answer that either. She didn't push, just reached across the table and laid her hand over mine. "You're not the first woman to feel something she didn't see coming," she said gently. "But you have to decide how much of yourself you're willing to lose, just to feel seen again." Her words followed me home. I avoided Jason for the next few days, not out of anger, but fear. Fear that this thing between us was already bigger than I could contain, that it would reach Evan, or worse, twist into something that didn't resemble the quiet, aching truth it had started as. But then came the night he knocked again, late, past 10. I almost didn't answer. When I opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept. His voice cracked. "I think I'm in over my head." I stepped aside. Let him in. He stood in the hallway like a guest who wasn't sure if they'd be welcomed again. "I wasn't supposed to feel like this," he said. "I thought it was just a moment, a thing we needed. But I can't stop thinking about you, even when you ignore me, even when I tell myself it's wrong." My chest tightened. "Jason, I know I'm younger. I know this is messed up. But you make me feel like I'm real, like I matter. And I know I shouldn't say this, but..." He paused, swallowed, looked at the floor. "I think I'm falling for you." It was the last thing I wanted to hear, because I believed him. And that made it worse. He wasn't playing a part. He wasn't chasing a fantasy. He was too young to even understand how badly this could break him, how quickly something like this could turn from memory to regret. "I can't love you back," I whispered. "Not the way you need." He stepped closer. "I don't care. You should." His jaw clenched. "Why?" "Because I'm not old enough to write a mortgage check. Because I still have a Spotify student account. You think I don't know. This is insane. I do. But it doesn't change what I feel when I'm around you." I turned away. Couldn't bear the weight of his words. "Jason, I was married when you were in middle school. So I've lived long enough to know better. And you haven't." He was quiet then, just breathing behind me. Finally he said, "You make it sound like that's a bad thing." I turned back, eyes burning. "It is, when I'm the one who should have stopped it." He stared at me, and for the first time since that night something shifted in his expression. Something colder, sharper, like he'd just seen the line between what we had and what we really were. "I didn't force you," he said, voice low. "I know." "Then don't make it sound like you didn't want it." I didn't respond. He took a step back. His jaw worked. "I'm not some stupid kid, you know. I never said you were. But you think it. I see it in your face. Every time I try to be enough, you remember I'm not what you should want." He was right. And I hated it. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He didn't say anything. He just walked out. That was a week ago. He hasn't been by since. I hear him sometimes, his footsteps on the porch, the muffled sound of his music at night. But the lightness is gone. The energy that once lingered in the hall in the quiet, pauses between us, it's gone. And I don't know if he hates me now, or if he still aches the way I do. I haven't told anyone else, not even Carol, not even when she asked if I was doing okay again. Because the truth is, I don't know. I don't know how to carry what we were, what I let us become. I don't even know how to name it, but I know this, I can't go back. And I don't know how to go forward. Jason gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Not just heat, not just touch, but the feeling of being wanted for who I was, beneath the armor, wrinkles, flaws, age, and all. But the moment I let him in, I became someone I can't explain to myself. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive the part of me that still wishes he'd come back.